I was livid because David Cassidy and I talk about being sober a lot, and it appeared to me he was drunk, and I was mad, and I'm so glad I didn't get through because I'd have left an angry message.
Danny Bonaduce was once the wisecracking redhead from the Partridge Family. But the last time Danny Bonaduce spoke on radio, listeners could barely understand him. His words came out as gibberish. His wife found him talking nonsense one morning and called 911. That was the beginning of the end. The man who once knocked out Donny Osmond now needs help walking downstairs. At 64, after brain surgery and a year of terrifying symptoms, he's unrecognizable. He spent decades getting punched in celebrity boxing matches. Those hits finally caught up. What happened to his brain shocked even his doctors. Danny Bonaduce was born on August 13, 1959, in Broomall, Pennsylvania. From the moment he arrived, his life was filled with pain. His father, Joseph Bonaduce, was a successful television writer, but behind closed doors, he was also a violent and bitter man. Danny said his father hated him from birth. As Danny got older and started to shine in Hollywood, the abuse got worse. It wasn't just emotional torment, it was beatings that left visible bruises. So visible, in fact, that Shirley Jones, who played his mom on The Partridge Family, often noticed the damage on his body when he arrived on set. She wasn't the only one. Other adult cast members saw it too, and instead of ignoring it, they stepped in. On weekends, they invited Danny to stay with them, quietly rescuing him from a home that had become a nightmare. For years, Danny thought he was just a fun kid everyone wanted to hang out with. It wasn't until much later, watching TV specials, that he realized the truth. They were protecting him. Shirley Jones later admitted they couldn't stand seeing him hurt anymore. They did what his real parents never did. They cared. Danny's entry into show business happened like something out of a movie. When he was just 4, he was spotted in a Burbank coffee shop by actor Richard Chamberlain. Danny was quoting philosopher Henry David Thoreau. Chamberlain leaned across the booth and told his mom, "Lady, you should get that kid to an agent." And just like that, Danny's life changed. By 9, he had landed a role in The Trouble with Girls, starring Elvis Presley. He still remembers using Elvis's bathroom with gold taps shaped like women's legs. When filming wrapped, Elvis gave Danny a miniature Cadillac. It was 5 feet long. By age 10, Danny was already acting regularly. He joined the Screen Actors Guild when he was only 4. He had small roles on shows like Bewitched and Mayberry RFD. In one Bewitched episode, a chimpanzee even bit him on the head. But even as his acting resume grew, he remained stuck in a chaotic and dangerous home. In 1969, he landed a role on The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, a show written by his own father, the same father who abused him. The irony was hard to miss. His dad was writing family-friendly TV while destroying his own family behind the scenes. As Danny got more attention, his father grew more resentful. It wasn't just jealousy, it was fury. And Danny couldn't escape him. Even at work, his dad's shadow followed. In 1970, at age 11, Danny was cast as Danny Partridge on The Partridge Family. He played the wisecracking middle son who played bass in the fictional family band. The show paid him $400 a week, about $3,000 in today's money. Every time he went to work, he was driven past screaming fans. Some shouted, "It's only Danny," when they realized he wasn't David Cassidy. Still, Danny was becoming a star. But at home, things were crumbling. His parents divorced in 1972. He was in the middle of it all, trying to hold on to a job millions of kids dreamed of, while living through a nightmare most couldn't imagine. By then, Danny had already started using drugs. At age 11, he was smoking marijuana and drinking cocktails. Behind the scenes of one of TV's most wholesome shows, Danny was spiraling. The public saw a cheeky redhead with a bass guitar, but off-screen, he was drowning in pain. His co-stars became a second family. Susan Dey and David Cassidy treated him like a little brother. But not all the relationships were healthy. Dave Madden, who played their band manager, took Danny under his wing. Madden taught him how to play cards and drive a car. But he also introduced him to adult vices: smoking, drinking, and gambling. For Danny, it was like trading one kind of dysfunction for another. Madden gave him shelter during the worst times, but he also pulled him deeper into an adult world Danny wasn't ready for. The show ran for 4 seasons, from 1970 to 1974. It made Danny famous, but it also made his home life even worse. His father couldn't handle his son's success. Danny once said his dad showed nothing but animosity from day one. Fame didn't heal that. It made it worse. Joseph Bonaduce had worked on shows like Bonanza, The Waltons, and That Girl, but his own son was now the star, and he hated it. Danny's fame didn't protect him. If anything, it made him more vulnerable. He was a child acting in adult spaces, under the spotlight and under pressure. By the time the show ended, Danny was already deep into substance use. When the show ended in 1974, Danny was a teenager. But he wasn't the cute red-headed kid fans remembered anymore. He was growing into what he later described as a hideously fat, drunk adolescent. That's his own words. He said his acting career basically died right there. Hollywood had no interest in overweight teenage alcoholics, and he knew it. He went from being a household name to being totally unwanted. And it happened fast. No slow fade, no graceful exit, just gone. But that wasn't even the most brutal part. Years later, in 1995, Bonaduce said something that stunned everyone. He didn't blame typecasting. He didn't blame bad luck. He blamed himself. He said he just wasn't that good of an actor. That honesty hit harder than any headline. Sure, he'd always used the excuse that people only saw him as Danny Partridge. But in reality, he believed he didn't have the talent to survive in the industry. It wasn't just that he got older or gained weight. Even if none of that had happened, he didn't think he would have made it. That level of self-awareness is almost unheard of in Hollywood. His personal life? That was a different disaster entirely. Danny started smoking marijuana at just 11 years old. Things went downhill from there. By the 1980s, cocaine was his main drug. In 1985, he got arrested in Los Angeles for cocaine possession. And it wasn't just any arrest. The National Enquirer bailed him out in exchange for an exclusive story. His pain became their profit. His mistakes were now tabloid fodder. Danny Bonaduce spent 20 years locked in a losing fight with alcohol. He tried to control the drugs, but the alcohol always won. He called himself a professional maniac, bouncing from one chaotic episode to the next. His life became a constant spiral: meltdowns, arrests, and total collapse. At one point, he lived in his car for years on and off. People would see him and laugh, saying, "Hey, it's the guy from the Partridge Family," not realizing they were watching someone completely destroyed by addiction. Things got worse. Much worse. On March 31st, 1991, everything exploded. Bonaduce, then working as a DJ in Phoenix, got into a violent fight with a transvestite prostitute named Darius Barney. It started with a $20 exchange for oral sex, then escalated when Barney revealed he was a man. Bonaduce snapped. He demanded his money back, then beat Barney so badly he needed reconstructive surgery. Bonaduce fled the scene in his Camaro, racing through the streets of Phoenix with police cars and a helicopter chasing him. Officers found him hiding naked under a pile of clothes in a closet, at his downtown condo. His wife let the cops in. The charges were brutal: felony flight, aggravated assault, and strong-arm robbery. He faced up to 8 years in prison and $150,000 in fines. He was released on $8,400 bail and tried to defend himself by saying he was just trying to help someone slumped against a wall. But the police had two very different stories, and neither looked good for him. In July 1991, he cut a deal. The robbery charge was dropped. He pleaded guilty to endangerment and no contest to assault. He got a suspended 90-day jail sentence, was ordered to do hundreds of hours of community service, and had to pay $4,500 in restitution for the medical bills. He also lost his job, and because he was already on probation from a cocaine case in Florida, this stunt nearly landed him in even more trouble. After Phoenix, his life took an even more bizarre turn. He became so desperate, he started flying around the country doing charity stunts for radio stations. Chicago's Jonathan Brandmeier came up with the idea first: have Bonaduce show up as some poor bastard in need to raise food for a charity drive. It worked. Listeners loved the spectacle. Other radio stations copied the idea. Bonaduce played the role so well, he turned it into a twisted side hustle. He became a professional victim, a walking punchline, a broken celebrity who could cry on cue, beg for help, and still make people laugh. Between 1994 and 1996, he hosted The Danny Bonaduce Show in Chicago. This is where he really became something more than a former TV kid. He talked fast, tackled edgy topics, and connected deeply with listeners. He turned the messiness of his life into something people could relate to. In 1995, he even launched a TV talk show called Danny, with guests from the Partridge Family on the first episode. At one point, he was flying between Chicago and Detroit every week, doing morning shows in one city and afternoons in the other. It was exhausting, but it showed how serious he was about making this second chance count. In 1998, he got a shot in New York at Big 105. Then came more shows in Los Angeles, more cities, more drama. But the real turning point, the calm after the storm, came in 2011. That's when he moved to Seattle and joined 102.5 KZOK FM. For once, things settled. He co-hosted the morning show with Sarah and stayed there for 12 years. Over 3 decades, he worked in nearly every major U.S. market: Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, New York, Phoenix, and Seattle. He joined the Adam Carolla Show in 2007 and celebrated 1 year sober that same year. In 2008, he even got his own solo show, Broadcasting Bonaduce. That ended in 2009, but the run had already proven something important. Danny Bonaduce made it in radio not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He didn't pretend to be better than anyone. He leaned into the mess, and it worked. When he retired, he said, "I am the luckiest guy in entertainment." He wasn't exaggerating. From joining the Actors Union at age 3 to retiring 60 years later, he never stopped finding a way to stay in the game. His story is messy, loud, sometimes dark, but above all, it's honest. And that's why P.E. Danny Bonaduce's life hit the national spotlight in a way no one could have predicted, on The Oprah Winfrey Show. Sitting there in front of a daytime audience, he opened up about going from teen stardom to living homeless in his car behind Mann's Chinese Theater. It shocked millions. Just weeks before, the National Enquirer had screamed a brutal headline: "Danny Bonaduce starving." People suddenly realized just how bad things had gotten. The media attention was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brought help and attention. On the other, it turned his pain into tabloid entertainment. That one Oprah interview opened the floodgates. Danny kept sharing his struggles on talk shows and reality TV, with his life slowly turning into a product. It all reached a boiling point years later with Breaking Bonaduce, where nothing, absolutely nothing, was off limits. But that first Oprah appearance made the pain real, and it made it public. Then came Gretchen. Danny met her on November 4th, 1990, during a blind date. By the end of the day, they were married. Just like that. Their whirlwind decision turned into a 16-year marriage. They had 2 kids, Dante and Isabella. But behind the scenes, it was chaos, drugs, rage, addiction. Gretchen spent years trying to hold the family together, covering for him, making excuses. Eventually, she hit her limit. In her 2019 book, Surviving Agent Orange, she described moments of horror, like the time Danny nearly ran her over with his car while high and trying to leave for drugs. She later said she realized early on that when he drank and used drugs together, he would lose control completely. She had to ration his money and keep control of everything, or else things got dangerous. Their marriage officially ended in 2007. It cost Danny over $3 million and left deep emotional scars that even he couldn't joke about later. He used that experience to warn others, especially when he married again, about signing a prenup. In 2001, Danny released his autobiography, Random Acts of Badness, My Story. It ran nearly 300 pages and spared no detail. He wrote about the beatings he and his brothers took from their father, Joe Bonaduce, who was a well-known sitcom writer. There was one story where his father broke a wooden chair over Anthony's head. Anthony responded by beating their dad senseless. Danny said his father once told him he was an asshole who got a lucky break, and that he never liked Danny enough to hit him. That line stuck. After the Partridge Family ended in 1974, Danny fell hard. No money, no home. He was sleeping in his car behind Mann's Theater. Every morning, he would walk among the tourists, pretending he still belonged in Hollywood, while they had no idea their childhood star was just steps away, homeless and broken. Then came the show that went too far, Breaking Bonaduce. VH1 launched it in 2005. It was raw, ugly, and real. The show aired for just over a year, but what it captured was Danny's full unraveling. Viewers saw his drug use, his wild behavior, and his attempts to rebuild his body using performance-enhancing drugs. But it didn't stop there. One episode showed Danny locking himself in the bathroom and slashing his wrists with a razor. He tried to end it all, on camera. Instead of stopping the cameras, producers allegedly told him to go through with it. The show became more than reality TV. It was a public meltdown. His marriage with Gretchen disintegrated in front of millions. Friends who had known him for years said they didn't even recognize him anymore. The show ended in 2006, but the damage had been done. Variety called the show so disturbing it left you needing a shower just for watching. In 1994, Danny Bonaduce made a move no one expected. He stepped into the world of professional wrestling. This wasn't a joke or a quick publicity stunt. He trained seriously and went all in. His debut match wasn't even on TV. It was a dark match against Christopher Knight, yes, Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch, held before a WCW event in Chicago. It was meant to promote a local radio show, and only the live audience got to see it. For years, fans thought the footage was lost forever. Then, in 2024, a rare fan recording finally appeared. This strange match wasn't just entertainment. It was Bonaduce's way of proving he wasn't just a washed-up child star. He wanted people to see him as tough, unpredictable, and ready to risk his body for real. But wrestling was just the beginning. Danny had spent years training in martial arts. He held black belts in Okinawan Chinan Ryu, Taekwondo, Tokyo Ryu, and Shorin Ryu. He trained under Chuck Norris himself. For more than 2 decades, Bonaduce studied American Tang Soo Do from Bob Burbage, a Norris black belt. He wasn't just another celebrity throwing punches for fun. He had real skills. Back in 1980 and 1981, he won international championships. And when celebrity boxing became a trend, Danny didn't just play along. On January 17, 1994, he faced Donny Osmond at the China Club in Chicago. It was hyped as the Thrilla in Vanilla. Bonaduce also took down Barry Williams, Greg Brady, in another widely watched fight. These weren't lucky wins. His martial arts background gave him a major edge. He even appeared on Chips 8 times as a martial artist. Every punch he threw was backed by years of training. Then came one of the wildest moments in his public life. On October 2, 2007, during the Fox Reality Channel's awards show, reality star Johnny Fairplay jumped into Danny's arms on stage. It looked like a weird joke until it turned serious. Bonaduce threw him over his head, and Fairplay landed face first on the stage. 4 front teeth were gone. His jaw was shattered. The footage was brutal. Fairplay lay motionless while Bonaduce strutted around, soaking in applause. Fairplay was supposed to return to Survivor just 8 days later. Instead, he was recovering from the injuries that would ruin his comeback. Alexis Arquette stood up at the event and called out Bonaduce, blaming it on alcoholic rage. That moment became a reality TV legend. Legal trouble followed quickly. Some expected Bonaduce to face criminal charges, but the Los Angeles District Attorney didn't see it that way. They ruled that Fairplay had jumped on Bonaduce and acted in an offensive way. The DA called it self-defense. That ended the criminal side of things, but a civil lawsuit was next. Fairplay sued him in March 2008. He accused Bonaduce of battery, emotional distress, and more. He also sued the venue and the TV channel. The damage was serious: 15 hours of surgery, 4 root canals, and a rebuilt jaw. The case ended in a private settlement. No one ever revealed how much it cost. The most dangerous fight of Bonaduce's career came in 2009. On January 24th, he boxed Jose Canseco, a former baseball star and a much bigger man. The fight took place in Aston, Pennsylvania. Bonaduce was 5'6". Canseco stood at 6'4". During training, Bonaduce said he knew it was hopeless. He couldn't even reach Canseco's body properly. Still, he made it through all 3 rounds. Canseco landed hard shots in the first and third rounds, but Bonaduce didn't go down. The match ended in a majority draw. Only about 1,500 people showed up, and most left before the result was read. Danny Bonaduce met Amy Railsback at a Starbucks in Los Angeles in April 2007. He was 48 years old, a former child star with a chaotic past. She was 28, a substitute teacher. It was a random meeting, but something clicked. She was 23 years younger than him, calm and steady, the opposite of his previous relationships. They dated for over 3 years. In March 2009, he proposed with a skull and crossbones ring, a perfect symbol of his edgy personality. On November 22, 2010, they got married at the Four Seasons in Maui. It was a private wedding. For Danny, it was his 3rd marriage. For Amy, it was her 1st. He was 51. She gave up teaching and became his full-time manager, running his company, Gravel Tones Productions, Inc. This wasn't just another relationship. It was a turning point. With Amy, Danny found something he had never really had: stability. 7 years into the marriage, that stability turned into something even more powerful. Amy helped him break a 20-year cycle of alcohol addiction. The wake-up call came during a cruise to Spain. Danny was drinking beer and eating pie straight from the tin at 11 in the morning. Amy looked at him and asked, "Is this really how you want people to remember you? The fat, drunk guy on TV?" That question hit him hard. It was a big moment. Danny had already kicked drugs 10 years earlier. He had managed to avoid jail for possession and assault through plea deals. But alcohol was still a problem. He thought a few beers wouldn't hurt. He was wrong. Amy's honesty pushed him to act. He checked himself into rehab, but kept working, co-hosting his LA radio show and The Other Half. Amy, as both his wife and manager, made sure he stayed on track. She kept him moving forward, personally and professionally. Years earlier, someone else had tried to help him too, David Cassidy. In March 1991, when Danny was at rock bottom, Cassidy called. He offered Danny a spot as the opening act on his concert tour. But there were strict rules: no drinking, no drugs, no women. At the time, those were Danny's entire lifestyle. He had been sentenced to probation just the year before for crack cocaine possession in Florida. At first, he said no. He couldn't imagine living that way. But Cassidy didn't give up. He told Danny, "You should be in on the joke, not become the joke." That stuck with him. Eventually, he agreed. It was his first time doing stand-up comedy, and it was terrifying. But it changed everything. The tour opened the door to radio interviews, which turned into job offers. That's how Danny's radio career began. Cassidy's help came first. Amy's help came later. But both moments mattered. One gave him a second chance at a career. The other gave him a second chance at life. Then came the health crisis. In April 2022, Amy noticed something strange. Danny's speech didn't make sense. He was trying to talk, but the words came out as gibberish. She called an ambulance. He was 63 years old and rushed to the hospital. He stayed there for 5 days, barely remembering anything. The doctors suspected a stroke. His father had suffered one, too. But after several brain scans and neurological tests, they ruled it out. Still, no one could explain what was happening. He couldn't walk without help. His balance was so bad he was scared of his own stairs. He could barely speak. His words came out slurred or jumbled. It was terrifying. He felt trapped in his own body, unsure of what was going wrong or how to fix it. That 5-day hospital stay was just the beginning. For the next year, his life became a blur of doctors' visits. He saw more than 100 specialists. One Tuesday, he had 5 medical appointments in a single day. Still, no answers. His symptoms kept getting worse. His life was reduced to talking to doctors while his body failed him. Finally, in March 2023, he got a diagnosis: hydrocephalus. It's a condition where cerebrospinal fluid builds up in the brain, causing pressure. It explained everything: his speech problems, his balance issues, the fear, the weakness. But it also meant he needed brain surgery. Hydrocephalus is often mistaken for other disorders like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. In fact, up to 1 million people in the US may have it, but fewer than 20% are correctly diagnosed. In Danny's case, doctors believed it was likely caused by years of head trauma. His wrestling matches, celebrity boxing, even taking guitars to the face, all of it had done more damage than he realized. The condition's 3 main symptoms, difficulty walking, memory loss, and bladder problems, match what he was going through. Research shows that around 18% of boxers develop brain issues from repeated trauma. Danny became one of them. On June 5, 2023, Danny Bonaduce was wheeled into surgery, knowing it could be his last moment alive. The operation lasted 2 hours, and it wasn't just complicated, it was life-saving. Doctors had discovered he had hydrocephalus, a condition where fluid builds up inside the brain, causing pressure that can damage tissue or even kill you. For months, this condition had been quietly attacking him. He had trouble with balance and thinking clearly, and listeners of his radio show had started to notice something was off. The surgery involved placing a device called a VP shunt in his brain. It's a tiny tube with a one-way valve that drains fluid from his brain into his stomach, where the body can safely absorb it. To do this, surgeons had to drill into his skull and carefully thread the shunt through his brain. One wrong move could have ended everything, but they pulled it off. Hours later, Danny woke up, and the first thing he said to the world was, "I lived, bitch." It was loud, bold, and totally him. That short sentence went viral, shocking fans who hadn't realized how close he'd come to dying. Behind the joke was a real sense of relief and raw emotion. He'd stared death in the face and walked away. He later admitted the doctors warned him about serious risks, like infections, bleeding, or the shunt failing completely. But he made it. The surgery might have saved his life, but it also marked the end of a chapter. In December 2023, just 6 months later, Danny announced he was retiring from his radio show in Seattle. He had been on air since 2011, building a strong connection with listeners who followed his wild stories, honesty, and humor. But the truth was hard to ignore. His health was changing fast. His speech was slower, and talking for long periods was becoming harder. Even though he loved the job, he knew it was time to stop. His final show was emotional. Callers thanked him for being real about his struggles with addiction, fame, and relationships. It wasn't just radio for them. It was comfort, company, and truth. Walking away also meant losing a steady income at age 64, and that added stress to an already difficult situation. Then came another big change. Danny packed up and moved from Seattle to Palm Springs. He kept a condo in Seattle for the memories, but he needed a place better suited to recovery. Palm Springs had what his doctors recommended: warm, dry air, and access to good medical care. It was a place known for rest and healing, especially for older patients or those with long-term conditions. But the move wasn't easy. He had to leave behind the city where he'd rebuilt his life. And while Palm Springs gave him sunshine, it also meant isolation. He was now far from the friends and co-workers who had supported him through tough times. The hardest part? Admitting how much his body had changed. "I'll never run track or box again," he said. "But if I can get to the kitchen on my own, bravo." For Danny, that wasn't a joke. It was his new reality.